Hi everyone, thanks for coming to Anywhere Fitness with April and stopping by to learn about form. That's what we're going to do today. It's going to be a form-focused little workshop with April. So we're just going to talk about a few exercises that I think are super important to go over so that when you add weights that you can definitely have challenge. But if you have the perfect form, you're going to be doing it safely and have very little risk of injury. So we're going to go into squats today. So we're going to go toes slightly turned out, which is super important. So my feet have widened a heel toe wider than hip distance. So if you find that hip distance and then go heel and toe wider, that is pretty much the perfect mid-stance squat. So I perform most of my squats just like this. I have my toes, if you look at your toes, they're not forward on a railroad track, slight turnout. Then we're gonna sit back our hips. So our knees will bend, but we want our hips to go first. So we're gonna shift the hips back, keeping our spine long. So we're gonna create length in spine, shift the hips back. Now, as soon as you do that, you should feel weight in your heels. Now, another thing you want to think about when you're going down is you want your knee and middle foot, middle toe to be guided in that same direction. So we're going to sit back, open those knees slightly, right to that middle toe, and we're going to sit back and down. We're going to slowly come back up, and I'm going to shift side view. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we don't shift too far back and then not drop the hips. So we've shifted back, we've kept a long spine, but notice that my hips are shifting back, but they're not actually dropping down. So we want to get load in the quads and hamstrings and use those glutes. So we're going to sit back, and we're going to sit also down. So now you can see that my hips have lowered. I still have length in spine. My shoulders are elevated above my hips. You're going to come back up. Hips are going to then come under your shoulders, and that completes your squat. So another movement that sometimes as you're coming back from that squat, as you're raising up, sometimes if you come too far forward, you can get too much extension in your back. So you want to just make sure that you stay in that neutral position. So we're going to sit back, guide those hips back and down, push your heels into that floor, elevate, and use the backs of those legs to help assist those quads on that squat. All right, so I hope that helped shifting those hips back and then also feeling those knees open out to those middle toes. When you open those knees out to those middle toes, you're not rocking too much on the outside of the foot. You're just opening slightly, engaging that outer glute and feeling that inner quad. So that's our form for a regular squat. You can add that weight here at the shoulders, have those weights right at your sides, and then get all that intensity in that perfect squat. All right, now a plie squat, you're going to actually go wider. So from this position, you're going to even go a heel toe wider. Toes are going to turn out. Now, the longer your leg, the wider your stance is going to be, okay? So when you drop your hips down, we're not actually going to hinge this time from our hips. We're going to stay tall, shoulders stay over hips, and we're going to drop those hips down right under those shoulders. So we're going to try not to shift back here. So instead of hinging, we're going to think about the toes turning out, knees turning out toward those toes, and hips dropping down without too much hinge. Okay, so as we drop down, we also want to make sure that our knees open right out to those toes as well. So we're going to come up, dropping down, making sure our heel is directly under the knee, and come up. So a common fault here is that your feet aren't at a wide enough distance, and then look what happens when I come down. I have my heels inside, and I have my knees out over my toes. So you're going to feel that so much through your knees and then not enough through the glutes and inner thighs. So you want to make sure you have that width. Drop down, and I always like to look, knee right over ankle, and lift up. How does that feel? Okay, Now, let's do a few more. Drop down and come up. Now, when you come down, make sure that your knees don't fall forward. Okay? So that's a very common fault right here, that the knees come forward. You want to open the knees, so you're going to be engaging that outer glute once again by that knee opening. So you have knee right over ankle. Perfect. And our shoulders are over our hips. And our heels are driving down and coming all the way up. All right, lunges. So lots of legs right now, right? All right, so lunges. When you do a lunge, you're going to create tall posture. So you want to start with your feet hip distance apart. So you'll have those toes this time now on that railroad track, okay? You're going to step back as far as your leg can step back. When you step back, you're going to step back and land on your toes. Not even the ball of my foot is on the floor. Then once that foot has dropped, you have that long distance, you're going to then bend your back knee and keep that heel elevated off the floor and drop. So your front knee, 90 degrees, pushing down into that heel. You can elevate straight up in a stationary lunge right here, or you can come forward, right back into a rear stepping lunge right here. So we want to create that 90-90. A common fault is stepping back, but you're too shallow, and when you drop that knee, look what happens to your front knee. So this is the working leg, the front leg. So you want to make sure that you get that long step back, drop down vertically, and have that knee vertical over that ankle. You're going to push down into that front foot, drive down and lift up, back into that neutral, or you can come up here in this stationary lunge. You're going to keep your knee slightly bent at the top. Notice what my back knee does right here. It bends and drops down. It should be under that hip. We're trying to get a parallel lower leg. So I want you to look at my back heel for a moment. Lift that heel up as far as you can, so it's almost tippy toe. Takes the pressure off of your calf and your Achilles. And come back up and step in. So let's check that out. Another great way to find your correct distance in a lunge is to come down on the floor. So create a 90. You have your ankle right underneath your knee right underneath your hip, and then you're going to elevate and come up. So this back foot, heel is elevated. Now when you drop that back knee down, you should have a very perfect 90-90. So that's a really good way to find how far apart your feet should be. All right, so that's our lunges. We're going to next go into lateral raises. I'm going to grab light weights. And this is a bent arm lateral raise. Sometimes gets very confusing, but I want to take that confusion away. I want it to be super simple. So we're going to hold those weights right at your sides. We're going to then bring our lower arm up to parallel. So now we've locked in and we have our wrist nice and neutral. So you want to make sure that your hands are actually thinking about holding 2 glasses of orange juice right here. So you don't want them to pour out, right? We want them to be nice and full right here holding. All right, now we're going to lift your elbows out to shoulder height, and we're going to bring those elbows back in. So I want you to think of the outer portion, this bony part of the outside of the elbow, lead it out, come up, staying below shoulder height, and then bringing the inside of the elbow back to that waistline. Notice that my hands haven't come back together. So we're going to keep that 90, elevate, and come down. So the palms are facing in. Now notice when you come up, what happens? Palms should face down. Look at your wrist. It should still be nice and level, not letting that weight hang and pull on that wrist and drop down. Another common fault is to go and elevate too high. So you're going to come up and above those shoulders, which goes into your traps. So when I lift, I come up just shy of shoulder height right here. Okay? We're going to avoid bringing those forearms in. We want to keep that weight on the outside of that of the shoulder, and we want to protect the elbow joint. So when we come up, we want to have that wrist straight out from that elbow. So 90 degrees at the bottom, 90 degrees at the top. So that lead is right there on the outside of that elbow. Right there and down. So I always say, those 2 glasses of orange juice, pour it out on the way up. All right, so that's your lateral raise. I hope that felt good. All right, next we're going to go into a tricep kickback. Okay, another reason that I want to go over this is because a lot of people overuse their wrist when working triceps. So I want you to picture that you cannot move your wrist. So picture that you have a cast on your wrist. You're going to bring yourself into that nice strong position in a hinge. Bring your elbows up. And you're going to squeeze those elbows in. We're going to extend the arms back, but we're going to try not to push back like this. We're going to try to keep that weight pointing down, and we're going to bring those elbows back, bring those lower arms back in with those elbows still high. All right, let's try that again. Send it back and bring it in. Now check that wrist again. You can always tell because you're going to add extra motion right at this very end where you're going to add that weight going back. So that's the wrist that's taking that action. So I always think of the very butt of my weight, thinking about it going straight back. So elbows high, shoulders back. You're in a nice strong hinge position, squat, holding yourself steady, and we're going to extend the arms, and those forearms come back in. Those elbows do not drop, they stay elevated, and those wrists do not move. Those abs are in tight, and your chin is in slightly, so those necks don't get too much of an extension. Drop that chin a little. So that is your positioning for nice, relaxed wrists and not having too much action when you're doing those triceps. All right, next we're going to go into some biceps. So in our biceps, palms are going to be turned up. We're going to go into a curl, and as we curl, what's very common is your elbows are going to come forward. So this is very common. So when those elbows pop forward, you're going to lose a lot of the contraction. So what we want to do is isolate the upper arm, take from that elbow joint, slowly bring that forearm up. And notice when I come up, my wrist is not trying to get to my shoulder. So that's what happens is everybody's trying to get in, and then you have that elbow pop out, and then it's a lot of discomfort for that elbow joint as well. So we're going to come up, elbow stays under shoulders, and then we finish with about maybe a grapefruit size distance from your shoulder. So we're coming up and down. Another common thought when you're coming down, that you fall. So this is very common. So look at this move. Okay, now I'm going to come up. I'm going to come just shy of my shoulders. My elbows are still under. And now I'm going to slowly lower down. So my palm comes up and in. Now my knuckles go out and away. Up and in. Send the weight away without the upper arm moving. So complete isolation of your upper arm. So if you swing, notice how your upper arm comes out of position. So we're going to come up. You're going to control. There's no momentum. And notice at the bottom, I'm trying to unload my elbow joint. So I'm just letting it release, going right back in. Great. Lastly, what's really, really effective is if you can actually contract those biceps before you actually move. So contract and then lift. Contract and lift. So it's a lot of mind to muscle right there. All right, very nice work. All right, our last is going to be going into plank. Just going over plank and making sure that you're getting the most out of plank. So you're going to be taking your hands down onto the floor, and you're going to position your hands shoulder distance apart. Shoulders are back and down, And that's what's so important here is you want your body to be nice and flat, nice and straight. So retract your shoulders, and when you retract your shoulders, your chest should feel like it's coming through your arms. Now, your knees can always be on the floor. Belly buttons are pulled in strong. So nice long spine. Checking that neck, making sure that your chin doesn't fall in, and overstretch that neck and start rounding that upper back. So it's very common to be holding here, and then you have so much stress and it takes the tension out of those abs. So you're going to retract the shoulders, chest forward, tighten those quads. Great. Now let's look at our elbows. A lot of times the elbows are turned out. I want you to think about turning those elbows, retracting those shoulders back and down so that your elbows actually point toward your hips. Very nice. So you have shoulders stacked above wrists. When you fatigue, sometimes you end up back here. So you always want to make sure that you walk forward. If you feel that position change, drop to your knees and continue to hold from here. So remember, it's better to have better form than to work through it in bad form, because then you're going to end up having those traps or maybe even your neck be affected. All right, so shoulders back and down, nice quick release from that hold. Good. Now we're just going to come over into abs and just finish up right here. So just what's so common in abdominals is that when you have your hands behind your heads, your chin, for some reason, thinks that it needs to go straight up. I want you to think about that you want to round your back. And so you want that curvature to continue through that neck as well. So what I do is I just let my eyes look more at my thighs and outward at that plane. And then my chin just naturally tucks in. My hands are behind my head, but I'm not pushing forward on that head and adding any strain into my neck. So nice and comfortable, up and down, rounding as much as you can. And then you're going to try to feel curvature in that lower spine as well as you come up. So that's a very simple crunch right there. Rounding upper and lower spine. And anytime you do any movement, having your eyes always gaze out over those legs. So in any movement you have, hands are back, that head just rests, cradled into those hands, and those eyes just look at those thighs or gazing out over those legs. So those are my tips today, focusing on form in a lot of our main workout features that are in most of all of our workouts. So I hope that I helped in some way from my house to yours. Thanks for joining me at Anywhere Fitness. And I appreciate you subscribing. Would love to have you come back to my channel and see what else I have to offer. So hit subscribe and like, and thanks for coming.